President Trump arrives in China. Inflation here worsens as GOP midterm prospects darken. Trade, Iran, and artificial intelligence dominate the agenda in Beijing. Two new strands of immigration reporting. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin talks to our Nicole Skanga about the World Cup and potential ICE arrests. And our Camila Montoya Galvez tells us why Gitmo is nearly empty. Plus, what will artificial intelligence mean for your travel plans? And how many people will lose their jobs due to AI agents processing hotel, restaurant, and car reservations? Answer, it's a lot. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to the Takeout. Inflation news and inflation measurements have many structural components. Producer price index that, consumer price index this, core inflation, wholesale prices, energy, food, housing. Lots of headlines almost on a weekly basis. And right now they all tell the same story. Prices are up and affordability now is, politically speaking, becoming something akin to a four-letter word. Also, a raft of polls over the last few weeks shows President Trump approval rating in the low 40s or the high 30s. More importantly, his economic approval rating is even lower. Some surveys have pegged it as low as 30%. And that means, inescapably, that independents and a fair number of Republicans, even some in the MAGA movement, have either begun to give up on Trump policies or, at minimum, seriously reconsider them. What was once anxiety appears to be hardening into something else, and that spells an ill political wind coming. One, the recently erected GOP redistricting battlements in the South may not be able to withstand. This, then, is the backdrop, politically speaking, for President Trump's trip to China. He invited many corporate CEOs to join his entourage of economic talks, either to engage with the Chinese directly or wait on tippy toes to be called from the sidelines on a case-by-case basis. Tariffs are one issue, rare earth minerals another, Chinese commodity purchases here in the United States yet another. Of course, there's the war with Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, and despite Trump's recent denials, that too is on the agenda. Oh yeah, and the future of artificial intelligence. The U.S. and China are on a hell-bent race for AI supremacy. Any guardrails? Well, stay tuned. Oh, yeah, and don't forget Taiwan, because China never does. It is shortly before dawn Thursday in Beijing, and that's where we find, gratefully, CBS News foreign correspondent Anna Corin with a preview of the talks and the events ahead. Anna, set the scene.
Well, Major, it will be an action-packed day for the president. No doubt he was very exhausted after his long trip here to Beijing. He certainly received a warm welcome. The Chinese vice president greeting him on the tarmac among students waving Chinese and American flags. But his day will start with a trip to the Great Hall of the People, and that is where he will meet with President Xi. They will be in bilateral meetings for much of the morning. This afternoon, they will then head to the Temple of Heaven. This is a UNESCO park about 10 minutes, 15 minutes from where we are, south of the city. And this is a place that, in a bygone era, emperors would go to pray to the heavens. From there, they head to a state banquet this evening, back at the Great Hall of the People, before more meetings on Friday. But you mentioned his troubles at home. He's leaving those behind, Major, in the hope that he can bring many trade and economic deals back to the American people. We are talking about Boeing jets, beef, soybeans, natural gas. And yes, he has an entourage of high-level executives, the CEOs of 17 major industries traveling with him. And they will be planning on doing meetings. You know, he really set the scene, perhaps mid-air, when he posted that he's going to ask Trump to open up China to corporate America. Companies often face regulatory hurdles here, but he wants them to do business. And you mentioned rare earths, Major. This is a major point that President Trump will want to address at the height of the tariff war last year. Remember, there is a truce going on. They are hoping to extend that trade truce at this summit, the world was shocked. The US certainly was shocked when China threatened to cut off that global supply of rare earths and critical minerals, of which China has a monopoly of. So there's a lot to hash out over the next few days, Major.
And Anna, very quickly, we have just described, you quite helpfully, the U.S. expectations and desires. What are the Chinese expectations and asks?
There is a list, quite a long list, but obviously trade is big, reducing tariffs, as I mentioned, extending that very fragile trade truce. They want a reduction in tariffs. They want restrictions on the export controls of advanced semiconductors to also be reduced. They want sanctions against Chinese entities to be lifted. But look, if we're talking about the core of core interests for China and for Xi Jinping, that is Taiwan. It has been that way now for decades. But we've heard from Xi recently. He speaks about the reunification of the motherland. You know, the Chinese claim Taiwan as their own territory. So this is certainly in play, and that would involve the US stopping arms sales, changing its posture, and reducing its support for the island democracy, Major.
Anna Corin, thank you so very much. CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd joins me now. She's also former Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism, State Homeland Security. Homeland Security. Sam, always good to see you. What is your evaluation of a word that circles in Washington, doesn't circle much beyond Washington at moments like this, deliverables? What can be achieved?
Well, I think there's a difference between the deliverables that can be announced at the summit and what's actually going to lead to specific outcomes. We've seen President Trump go to various summits and announce deliverables. Billions of dollars in investment, enhanced bilateral ties, et cetera. We should expect that out of the summit, probably in the agricultural sector, in the aviation sector. Anna mentioned Boeing. But in terms of what is actually going to happen coming out of the summit, if we focus on the reality versus the rhetoric, it is more than likely that the trade imbalance between the U.S. and China will remain significant. It is more than likely that the United States will continue to restrict certain sensitive technologies that are destined for China, not only because U.S. Congress is deeply focused on national security concerns related to sensitive technologies, not to mention precluding the import of things from China that could be used by Chinese intelligence to gather information. Now, you asked Anna about what the Chinese want out of this. I think what we should all be watching for is whether we hear any public shift in President Trump's rhetoric vis-a-vis Taiwan. President Xi Jinping has talked about the great rejuvenation of China by 2049. Reunifying Taiwan with the mainland is a core part of that, and certainly behind the scenes as well. The issue of Iran is going to be front and center, but it is worth noting Iran is a mixed bag for the Chinese. The Iranians export so much energy to China. Certainly China will eventually feel an economic hit if commodities don't start flowing. But by the same token, the U.S. moving more military assets to the Middle East theater versus the Indo-Pacific is not a net negative for the People's Republic of China.
And when the president said, as he did yesterday on the South Lawn, that Iran's not even a topic he needs to bring up with the Chinese, that's sort of a head fake. He does need to bring it up, but he doesn't want to prioritize it beforehand to give China the perception of more leverage over that tough issue.
Well, in my experience, the preparation for these meetings includes just what you're giving a nod to, which is strategy. You don't want to walk into a meeting and make your ask, which is, President Xi, help us convince the Iranians to agree to all of our maximalist demands.
And open the Strait of Hormuz.
You need to walk into a meeting and convince the Chinese that they want something from you, that there's mutual benefit to cooperation, and then from there pivot to why China should engage on your behalf with Iran. Now, we do know, and it has been reported, that China did engage with the Iranian regime several weeks ago to get this first ceasefire. But President Trump needs to be delivering something to the Chinese if they're really going to engage on his behalf with the Iranian regime.
And if they do, that could address global energy prices, which might turn some of the inflationary news that is almost universally bad for President Trump in a more positive direction. Sam Vinograd, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin sat down for a conversation with CBS News' Nicole Skanga. And Nicole quite happily joins me now to my immediately left here at the family table. Nicole, what did he tell you about FIFA World Cup and ICE?
Well, we received a confirmation that ICE will be at the World Cup and immigration arrests are not off the table. Now, Major, he did say that ICE agents won't be there for mass roundups, but they're also not taking their immigration enforcement hats off. Take a listen.
We're not there that we're going to be enforcing mass immigration, but we're there to enforce the law. So
Mr.
if we find a
Secretary, what
felon
I
or we
hear
find
you
someone
saying
doing
is,
customs,
if
we're going
you
to go after them.
find a criminal, you will arrest them. But
Yes.
the mission at the World Cup is not immigration enforcement.
We're not there. Well, ICE always says immigration enforcement. We're always going to do that. But we're not there for solely that purpose. We're in there to do our job. Immigration, custom enforcement.
But immigration enforcement at the World Cup is not off the table because that is the mission of ICE.
As I said, we're not there to go round up mass individuals, but we are always looking for the worst of the worst. We're going to continue to do that. But the ICE's footprint is much bigger than that. As I said, it's immigration, custom enforcement.
And interestingly, ICE does have a presence at the Super Bowl, at other security events, Major. So they are there for looking out for counterfeit goods or, looking out for sex trafficking, for instance.
But this is a flashpoint around the World Cup for those
Absolutely.
travelers and nations wondering if they can come and enjoy the process
Whenever
here in the
ICE
United
pops
States.
up anywhere, be it at the nation's airports during the shutdown, there is concern from folks who see the badge and who wonder, why are they here? This was an opportunity for the Secretary to say there will be no immigration enforcement mission carried out at these games. And you see there, it's on the table.
Exactly. And what did he tell you about what is known as Alligator Alcatraz in Florida?
Interestingly enough, he sort of pushed back on what some Florida state officials have said about Alligator Alcatraz shutting down. He said DHS has evacuation plans, but they don't have any closure plans, Major. Take a listen to what he had to say. What's the timeline on Alligator Alcatraz and why shut it down? Is it too expensive? Was this the plan all along?
Well, I don't think we've said we're shutting it down.
Oh, okay.
That's not been an announcement we've made. But we do understand there's vulnerabilities there. It's a soft-sided facility. Right now, we have fires that are within 20 miles of it. We all know that Florida is pretty susceptible to hurricanes. So I could see where, we may run into a place where we may have to, but we have not made any announcement we're shutting.
So just to offer
Alcatraz down.
clarity, there are no near-term plans to close Alligator Alcatraz.
We have plans in case of a natural emergency, such as a wildfire or a hurricane, to have to be able to bring it down and pull the individuals out. But there's need for us to be able to flex when we have a big influx of illegals. So
a surge capacity.
There is such a surge capacity that would be needed.
And the secretary here making news on two other fronts when it comes to his vision for ICE, Major. One, he still wants to seek more detention space, obviously not shutting down Alligator Alcatraz here, but he may pivot away from warehouses, which is interesting because the DHS Inspector General is probing a $38 billion warehouse to detention program that was stood up by Secretary Noem. So he's saying they're looking at county jails, they're looking at shuttered facilities, they're pivoting away from those warehouses. He also told us, we reported just yesterday, that there is a new acting ICE director in David Venturello. Venturello will be the temporary ICE director, but he is still searching for a permanent head of the agency. If he were successful in nominating that person and confirming them, it would be the first time since President Obama that ICE would have a permanent leader.
And when that happens, or any developments on that front, I know that you will bring them to us.
Absolutely.
Nicole Sganga, thank you very much. More on immigration policy. I want to play for you, before we get to that, a pledge that came from President Trump less than 2 weeks into his second term. Listen.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people.
And yet, a CBS News review of government documents found Gitmo today mostly empty. CBS News, wow. CBS News immigration correspondent Camilo Montoya Galvez joins me to discuss his exclusive reporting, which has quite evidently got me choked up. Camilo, Tell me what you learned.
Hey, Major. Well, so we obtained internal Department of Homeland Security documents that showed, Major, that the president's ambitious and bold plan to hold as many as 30,000 detainees, as you heard him outline back last year in January of 2025, did not fully materialize. And when I say that, I mean that currently there are only 6 immigration detainees being held at Guantanamo base. That is nowhere close to that 30,000 number. In fact, over the past year in total, fewer than 900 immigration detainees have been sent to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, to be held there by U.S. officials pending their deportation. Right now, there are only 6 detainees. And in fact, the government employees on the island assigned to basically detain the immigration detainees at ICE and the Department of Defense outnumbered the actual detainees 100 to 1. There are about 600 military and ICE staff operating that mission and only 6 detainees. And the projected cost of the operation is $73 million, Major, just for the U.S. military. So the operation has affected relatively few detainees, certainly not 30,000, but it's costing a lot of money.
What's the explanation for this? Either the cost or so few detainees actually at Gitmo?
Well, we have to remember, Major, that just like Alligator Alcatraz, the plan to house immigration detainees at Guantanamo Bay was part of a broader Trump administration effort to send a message of deterrence. And that message was that if you come here to the U.S. legally, or if you don't self-deport, if you're already here in the country unlawfully, there's now a chance we can send you to a scary-looking or scary-sounding place like Alligator Alcatraz or Guantanamo Bay. That was the message of deterrence that the administration was pushing. So these locations were not necessarily picked for their efficiency. It is very labor and resource intensive and also expensive to send people to Guantanamo Bay. And oftentimes, it just simply does not make sense from an operational perspective when many of the detainees that would be sent there can actually be deported to their home countries instead of being sent to the middle of the Caribbean. So there are a myriad of reasons for why this operation has been far more limited in scope than predicted and outlined by the president. But one key aspect here is how difficult and expensive the process is. Major.
When it comes to immigration policy, we have 2 of the best, Camila Montoya Galvez right there and Nicole Sganga just a few moments ago. I want to thank them both. Still to come on The Takeout, how artificial intelligence is changing the airline industry and travel booking overall. Speaking of booking, Booking.com CEO Glenn Fogel joins us for that conversation. Also, my discussion with 2 decorated military officers on their new novel about a global war over land and resources ravaged by climate change. The year, you see it right there, 2084. Plus, for the first time, a poll has 2 Democrats atop the crowded field for California governor. Now, the margins in that poll are small. Is this a trend or not? Our reporter panel will take a closer look. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back. As you well know, almost every industry in the country, and actually globally, is integrating artificial intelligence into day-to-day operations. The airline industry, absolutely no different. To discuss this and a lot other in that space, I'm joined by Booking.com CEO Glenn Fogel. Glenn, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Tell my audience how, at least with airline tickets, AI is changing the world we live in.
Well, thanks for having me. And no doubt technology and AI in particular is making it much easier for people to find out what they need, what they want, what fits their budget. AI is a great tool for that, but it's not just the airline tickets, it's the entire trip. Because there's so many permutations you can make, so many different choices that you need more information, but you're not sure how to do it. Well, AI is solving that problem, and we're trying to solve it using AI through our products like our connected trip efforts that we're doing throughout all our different brands.
So does that mean as a customer, you can ask an AI agent to walk you through an imagined trip, which is not just airlines, it's restaurant reservations, it's tea times, it's hotels, it's a hike on a special place. All of that can go through an AI agent.
That is the goal. And you and I are both old enough to remember the human travel agent. And you'd go and you'd talk to the travel agent, and you'd have that conversation. And that person would know about you, know what you liked, what you could afford. And you'd go back and forth having, as you just said, that conversation. Well, that's the purpose with AI and all these beautiful chatbots, that you can actually have that same conversation. The difference is AI knows so much more. They know everything about travel, where that old travel agent had a couple brochures, some catalogs. But this is so much more. You can do so much more and be able to come down what really is perfect for you. In addition, while I say the old style travel agent knew you, they didn't know you nearly as well as we can do with AI and really personalization. And that's going to be an incredible advantage. And there's another thing. We all know we've all been frustrated when things go wrong in travel. Well, one of the wonders of AI and us with our Connected Trip is when one thing goes wrong, we can try and fix everything at once. And that's a real advantage.
Does AI save us money or lead us to more expensive options?
Well, no, that's one of the great things, is to provide the opportunity to save money. Now, sometimes it'll also provide value. You may spend more, but you'll be happy because you're getting more for that money. It's really being able to surface all that information in a way that you can understand it and make the choices you want to make, as opposed to be misled, or even worse, you just didn't know what was available.
Glenn, it's immaterial to you whether I admire you or not, but I do admire you because in this space, you talk about the downside risks of this new AI revolution, meaning entry-level employees are getting washed out of the system. And as you've described it in interviews, that first rung on the ladder is being taken away.
No, it really is a problematic issue that governments and leaders in business have to think very hard about. For example, customer service, I just mentioned how great it's going to be because we use AI to solve that problem. In fact, you make a call to some of our customer service agents, you're not talking to a human being, you're talking to our AI agent, which can be much faster. You don't have to wait on hold, and that's great for the customer. But it's not so good for somebody who that was going to be their first job, somebody who didn't have a lot of education, but a way to get onto that first rung of a career. And now it's no longer there. So what are we going to do for that person? How are we going to provide those entry-level jobs? Because AI is absolutely providing a way to eliminate them. And this is not new. Look, technology has been eliminating jobs for, since technology started. Basically, you go way back to the people in Northern England when the weaving stuff became automated and they rioted. We have that problem now, but the difference is it's happening so much faster. People were saying, well, jobs go away all the time. That's true. But the rate of change is what's important. And we have to think very hard, how are we going to help the people who are going to be displaced by these new technologies?
Glenn, what are you seeing in the travel space right now as inflationary pressures become more a part of the conversation?
It really depends on what part of the world you're in. We're very, very global. So in the U.S., travel is still going very, very strong, even though the numbers that came out yesterday about airline tickets up over 20%. That's a lot. But if you look at other parts of the world, they're being a little bit more cautious because they're concerned not only about inflation in travel, but will there be jet fuel? That's an issue that's come up a lot in other parts of the world, particularly in Asia and in Europe. Unfortunately, with the Strait of Hormuz closed, we have about a fifth of the world's oil is not going through the straits anymore. And that's a problem because you need jet fuel to get those planes to go. So people are very concerned about not right this second, but what's going to happen a few weeks or a few months from now.
Glenn Fogel, CEO of Booking.com. It's been a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, the year is 2084. Now, I know it's not, but just think about it that way. And much of the world in 2084, ravaged by climate change. The U.S. and China are reeling from their own civil wars, yet strangely aligned. That is the setting of a new novel written by my next guest, and you'll want to stick around for this conversation. Coming up on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. I thank you for staying with us. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. South Carolina's Supreme Court today unanimously overturned the murder conviction of former attorney Alec Murdaugh. In a sensational and heavily watched trial, I'm sure you remember, Murdaugh was convicted of killing his wife and son at their family estate in 2021. Murdaugh's lawyers successfully pushed for a new trial, accusing a county clerk of tampering with the jury. It's interesting to note that he will not, Murdoch, walk out of prison because he is separately serving a 40-year sentence for an array of financial crimes. Thus, he will remain in prison as he awaits a retrial on those murder charges. The Senate today confirmed Kevin Warsh to serve as the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. Democratic Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania joined all Senate Republicans in voting to confirm the nomination. Warsh's four-year term will begin Friday, and he replaces Jerome Powell, who clashed with President Trump over, among other things, the direction of interest rates. Warsh had previously signaled his support for lowering them. That's in line with Trump's wishes. But he will need to prevail on other members of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors to make that happen. A new book by two decorated military officers gives a cautionary tale, and that's putting it mildly, of what warfare might look like 60 years into the future. It is a world devastated by climate change. 2084, a novel of future war, is the latest product in a trilogy by Elliot Ackerman and Admiral James Stavridis. I spoke with them earlier today. Please listen. For the purposes of this conversation, we're going to shorthand Elliot and Admiral. So, Elliot and Admiral, I want to ask you something. You have three novels that look deep into the future. I want you to look 1 month in the future from right now. What's happening in Iran and what's happening in any other theater of operations you think my audience might be interested in. Elliot?
I think when we're looking at Iran, probably it's going to be continued tensions around the Strait of Hormuz.
A month from now.
A month from now. I still think that's what we're going to be talking about.
So what we experience now is not going to be all that different just 1 month from now.
Well, I think we're going to still see that the Strait is an enormous point of leverage for the Iranians. So I'll speak on that one issue, and
right.
I'll turn it over to my co-author.
Admiral, a month from now, what does the world look like?
One thing I'm watching, while the world is fixated on the Strait of Hormuz, I'm watching the war in Ukraine. Here we see the Ukrainians are getting on the front foot. I feel Putin is under pressure. That's a good thing. We need to continue that pressure. The Ukrainians sure will. We could get to a negotiation there, not in a month, but I think you could start to see that one come toward a finish, maybe late this year.
Admiral, I want to drill down on that point. Why do you think they're on the front foot, the Ukrainians? Because that's not where they've been for so many years.
You are correct, and I'll give you two numbers to buttress my argument. Today, the Ukrainians are building, wait for it, 1 million drones a month. 1 million drones a month. And they're using them, here's the second number, it's a grim one. They're using them to kill or knock off the battlefield 1,000 Russians a day. Putin lost 35,000 out of the fight in the last month. That's unsustainable, and the Ukrainians are moving forward, and they're retaking territory, your point, for the first time in almost 2.5 years.
Fascinating, which leads us, Admiral and Elliot, to a through line in your three novels, 2034, 2054, 2084. Technology, changing the battlefield, changing relationships. But in 2084, you have technological advancements and also the specter of climate change. Pick it up from there, Elliot.
I think it's the specter of climate change. This goes back to the Strait of Hormuz. You know, there's the old saying that the way Americans learn geography is through war.
Yes.
And geography...
Sadly true.
Yes. And geography really is the destiny of nations. But what's the one thing that can change geographic realities? Climate. And we're seeing that right now. You know, we're seeing that. Why was President Trump talking about Greenland? That's because of climate change. Right. So what we're doing is not only in 2084 looking at the future of warfare, but we're also looking at the future of geopolitics and how changes in the climate are going to change geography and change the interactions between nation states.
And Admiral, correct me if I'm wrong, was there not a time in the recent past when the Pentagon identified climate change as a massively destabilizing force? And didn't the Trump administration back away from that?
You have it exactly right. And I think the administration got it right the first time, as in Biden. This actually goes back to a period of time in Obama. And if you stop and think about it, what is climate doing? It's drought. It's rising sea levels. It's melting sea ice. Those are facts. And they are going to put enormous pressure on economies, farmers, inflame tensions, push migration. All that is going to lead to security challenges. I think it's irrefutable that is the case.
So I'm not versed in all three of the novels. I'm somewhat versed in 2084. Talk to my audience about something that they would naturally wonder. Do these novels wrestle with nuclear weapons? Do they wrestle with the rise of artificial intelligence? Admiral?
You nailed it. I'd say the through line is the rise of artificial intelligence. The first book is about U.S. and China in a war, and you see the edges of that. By the second book, it's front and center here in the United States, impacting our politics. By the time you get to 2084, it's a central prop in the entire drama. And so AI runs through all of them. But here's what really runs through all of them, and Eliot is best at addressing this. It's the human element. These are novels about real people, and I think that is the human story that we try to put in play in all three of them.
Are you the humanist in this combination and the Admiral's the strategist, Eliot?
Well, I think we do a little bit of both. Okay. But as much as we're talking about these books and like the geopolitical themes that drive them, yes, like fundamentally, these are character-based stories. You could pick up any one of the books and enjoy it on its own, but they're characters who in 2084, you see their progeny in 2034. And fundamentally, this project has been about projecting out what we think will be the three great challenges that will face humanity in the 21st century: peer-level war, AI and domestic politics, and climate change. And we tell the story of those challenges through the characters that are having to grapple with them.
You can listen to our entire conversation on your favorite podcast platform. It runs about 30 minutes. I guarantee you, humbly, it's worth your time. Yesterday, right here, Family Table, we played you an exchange where Maryland Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen challenged FBI Director Kash Patel to take a government-approved test to determine whether he, Patel, has a drinking problem. Patel said, well, I will if you will. The results are in, at least for Van Hollen. We'll share them with you, and our reporter panel will evaluate that when we come back right here at the Takeout. Welcome back. I say it with a smile every time. Reporter panel time. Let me introduce them. Nicholas Wu, congressional reporter for Semaphore. Daniela Diaz covers politics for Notice, soon to be renamed The Star.
The Star.
So, iron rule here. If I talk to you about it before we go to break, I talk about it as soon as we come back. So, on this program yesterday, we shared a soundbite. Maryland Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen saying to Kash Patel, do you have a drinking problem? He says, no, no, no. Van Hollen says, will you take this government test? It's called an audit test. And Patel says, I will if you will. Well, today on social media, bring it up, control room, Chris Van Hollen posted the results. He gets a score of 3, which, based on the way I'm looking at this score, this full sheet here, is pretty low. And then he says in the social media post that Patel may or may not give his test. He eagerly awaits it, but suspects he might lie about it anyway. This wasn't exactly where I was expecting all this to head, Danielle.
It was such a viral moment. I mean, I saw that. It was Chris Van Hollen being incredibly fiery, talking about all of these articles that we've seen in The Atlantic.
Which is not his brand, by the way.
It's not his brand. He's more of a mellow senator from Maryland. I know him pretty well, great guy. And we saw him really hit back against FBI Director Kash Patel in these viral moments, where also Mr. Patel was saying, you were slinging back margaritas.
Yeah, I had Oppo research on a bar bill here in D.C.
It was a very fiery back and forth, but I think it encapsulates the moment that we're in right now when it comes to Democrats and Republicans, the Trump administration and Democrats fighting on issues that are distracting from the day-to-day policy issues that the Democrats are trying to keep on when it comes to how expensive things are. When there's characters in the Trump administration, they're attracting a lot of attention.
No doubt, no doubt. I want to talk about this because I mentioned it earlier in the program, Nicholas. This new poll, Emerson poll, California, lots of polling, but this is the newest one. First one that shows, you bring it up, control room, that Javier Becerra, 19% in the poll, Steve Hilton, 17%. Interesting, Tom Steyer, another Democrat, 17%. So for the first time, you have 2 Democrats at least in contention for the top 2 spots. Why does this matter in California? Because of the unusual way they conduct their primary. It's not a partisan primary, so the top 2 finishers, regardless of party, advance to the general. Evaluate where we are in California.
Well, Democrats I talked to were really concerned, even a few weeks ago, that they would potentially be boxed out of the general election because of this whole top two primary. But, with the surge that we've seen.
Steve Hilton is a Republican, and Chad Bianco, Riverside County Sheriff, was for a while near the top. Bianco's clearly fallen back.
That's right, because the Democratic field was just so fractured that you had two Republicans towards the top with, 20-something% of the vote, and then all the Democrats in maybe the high single digits. Fast forward a little bit, with a lot of turmoil in that race. Mr. Becerra seems to have pulled ahead a bit. He's picked up a lot of the establishment support. The question is this, whether he can maintain that.
Whether he can maintain it. And speaking of Javier Becerra, who's been on this program, Tom Steyer, you haven't been. I await your willingness to come on this program. You're always invited. He was talking to KTLA, big station in Los Angeles, for an interview. And this is what happened as the interview was beginning to gain its beginning. So like the pre-interview or the pre-process. It's interesting. Listen.
By the way, this is a profile piece. This is not a gotcha piece, right?
Well, look, I think these questions are fair. It's in order to learn about you as a candidate.
So long as it's about the profile.
I don't know how you define profile, but I'd like to begin the interview.
The way I describe profile is you talk about all the things that I've done, things I want to do, and along with some tough questions. But not only tough questions.
Huh? What? What if it's tough? What if it's all tough questions? You can't handle that? Well, anyway, people in California will have a chance to figure that one out. To your point, Nicholas, can Becerra maintain this early incipient momentum?
That's for sure, since now he actually has all this attention on him.
A lot of it, yes.
That previously had been focused on Steyer. We saw how that went for former Congressman Swallow. And now for Becerra, he has to figure out how to consolidate the remaining support, but also deal with the scrutiny that he'll now face.
Daniela?
I was just surprised watching that because that's what we do.
His detractors here in Washington who did not think a lot of him as DHS Secretary in the Democratic Party were probably not.
A lot of things right now on social media about how some of his own colleagues are not his biggest fans. But I think you're in the hot seat. You're trying to be the governor of one of the biggest states in the country, one of the most influential states in the country.
Fourth largest economy in the world.
And you should be ready for being in the hot seat and facing tough questions. That's what reporters do. That's what you're supposed to do, especially if you're getting paid with taxpayer money and your goal is to help your state.
Very quickly, Daniela, you have some interesting reporting on how Republicans who, back in the Biden era, could not stop talking about gas prices suddenly not really got a lot to offer.
What a switch up. I mean, how many times were Republicans on airwaves to their own constituents, social media,
cutting
their
digital
stickers
ads,
saying Biden did this on gas pumps across the country? And I surveyed 2024 ads with battleground district Republicans to what things look like right now, this very moment, because of the Iran war and gas prices surging because of this. And it's crickets.
Laryngitis. They just really don't have much to say.
And a lot of the message that we're hearing is that it's not that they don't really know what their message is, and in this sort of scenario,
they're struggling. Yes. That is a quick summary. They're struggling. Nicholas Wu, Daniela Diaz, thank you very much. Which camera guy? Number one. Thank you very much. Coming up, our CBS News radio flashback brings us to 1977. You know that skyline? It's New York, city that never sleeps. Well, it went dark. That's next here on the Takeout. Welcome back. Time now for our CBS News radio clip of fame. The date, July 13th, 1977. The great New York blackout plunged the Big Apple into darkness and chaos all through the very hot and humid night in July. Among the damage, LaGuardia and JFK airports closed for hours. Thousands had to be evacuated from the subways. Nearly 1,400 stores were looted. More than 1,000 fires were set. And, interestingly, more than 3,700 people were arrested. And here is what it sounded like on CBS Radio in the earliest hours of a sweltering, inexplicable bout of urban darkness.
This is David Jackson, CBS News, New York. A major power blackout has hit New York City and surrounding communities. Mayor Abraham Beame has declared a public emergency. All off-duty police and fire officials have been told to report to duty stations. The plug was pulled on just about everyone in the city proper and some areas of the suburbs to the north and east. A spokesman for Consolidated Edison, the power company, says lightning struck major feeder lines somewhere between New York and Niagara Falls. The total blackout occurred at 9:34 Eastern Time tonight. The CBS News Broadcast Center is operating on emergency power. City authorities have told residents to remain where they are. Many elevators in high-rise buildings are not operating. New York airports, Kennedy and LaGuardia, have been closed to all traffic. They were operating on a limited basis earlier, but could not keep it up. Earlier this evening, CBS News reporter Doug Poling left the broadcast center to see what was happening in a darkened New York.
I'm standing on the corner of 57th Street and 8th Avenue, a very busy intersection here in Manhattan, where all the lights are out in the buildings and the street lights and the traffic signals, and the only lights that you can see are from automobiles, buses, and trucks. Traffic policemen are guiding cars through the intersections here, although a large traffic jam has developed, obviously because the normal traffic signal system is not working properly. There are a lot of people here on the streets in this hot, muggy night here in July. People just seem to be standing around looking, seeing what's happening. There goes an emergency vehicle of some kind with a red light on it, a van. There are quite a few emergency vehicles out here on the streets. As you can hear, the car is honking, people wanting to make sure they don't get hit in the darkness and in the confusion of not having any traffic signal system. Everybody seems to be just standing around curious. There doesn't seem to be anything in the way of panic or anything like that. People are just terribly interested in what's going on and, of course, anxious to have the lights go back. This is Doug Poling, CBS News in New York.
CBS News correspondent Jerry Landay lives on Roosevelt Island. That's in the middle of the East River between Manhattan and Queens.
I looked out across the river toward Manhattan, and I could see lights out all along the East River Drive, which is the express highway along the East River, and beyond, except for a hospital which has its own emergency power. When the voltage drop hit, it wasn't a sudden cutoff. You could imagine that people at great control boards were trying to limit or restrict the amount of the failure.
Jerry Neckman of CBS station WCBS in New York is keeping tabs on emergency services.
Insofar as police are concerned, there have been sporadic and light reports of looting. That's not considered an urgent situation. Thus far, most people have been behaving themselves during this emergency. The 4 to 12 tour, which goes off-duty at midnight, of course, is being held over. All off-duty police officers are being ordered to their nearest precinct, not the precinct where they work, but the precinct of residence. Mayor Bean has declared an emergency, and he's called together his agency heads, including Acting Fire Commissioner Stephen Murphy, Traffic Commissioner Theodore Karaguzoff, and Robert Lowe, the Environmental Protection Administrator. As far as the ambulance service is concerned, their problems have been traffic. They advise people to stay home in order to allow the streets for emergency vehicles. They had some problems with delays. They also had some radio problems. Some of their antennas and repeater systems were affected for a short time, but they report everything is working fine, that in the municipal hospitals there is full power. Some of the voluntary hospitals have had problems, but have switched to auxiliary power and are still operating.
That was Jerry Neckman, reporter of CBS station WCBS in New York. Without power, of course, there are no traffic lights in a city where driving is no picnic anytime. One description of the traffic tonight, bedlam, people everywhere. And air conditioning is out. And the temperature outside is about 90 degrees. There's been no word from Con Edison when power is expected to be restored. This is David Jackson, CBS News, New York.
By the way, the New York Mets were playing the Chicago Cubs that night at Shea Stadium. Lights went out in the 6th inning. The stadium organist, of all things, played Jingle Bells and White Christmas in July. The game was suspended, finished 2 months later. The Cubs won. Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report is next.